Little girl draws, perfect family portrait, teacher sees. What's missing and her heart stops. First impressions. Autumn rain drummed against the windows of Riverside Elementary as Mrs. Patterson arranged art supplies for her third-grade class. 22 years of teaching had given her an eye for spotting the children who needed extra attention. And today, she sensed she'd meet another one. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, forgotten beside a stack of lesson plans as she prepared materials for what she hoped would be an engaging first week. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. 8-year-old Sophia Martinez entered the classroom with mechanical precision that made Mrs. Patterson's chest tighten with concern. Her backpack straps were perfectly aligned on her shoulders, adjusted to exactly the same length. Her dark hair was pulled into a braid so tight it made Mrs. Patterson's scalp ache just looking at it, not a single strand out of place despite the morning's drizzle. While other children chattered and laughed, their voices creating the familiar symphony of childhood energy. Sophia moved to her assigned desk like she was following an invisible script written in stone. "Good morning, Sophia," Mrs. Patterson said warmly, crouching beside the girl's desk. The smell of new crayons and fresh paper filled the air around them. "I'm so excited to have you in our class." Sophia's response was immediate, rehearsed, delivered with the cadence of someone reciting lines from a play. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for welcoming me to your classroom. I promise to be an exemplary student and will not cause any disruptions to the learning environment." The formal language from such a young mouth sent a small chill through Mrs. Patterson. She glanced at Sophia's file again, the manila folder slightly worn at the edges from handling. "New student recently moved from across town. Mother listed as primary contact. Father." The line was blank, just an empty space that somehow felt significant, but it wasn't the missing father that concerned Mrs. Patterson most. It was the way Sophia sat so perfectly still, hands folded with mathematical precision, spine straight as a ruler, as if she were afraid of taking up too much space in the world. Her uniform was immaculate, not just clean, but pressed with hospital corners and creases sharp enough to cut paper. Around them, the children settled into their desks with the comfortable chaos of childhood. Backpacks hit floors with soft thuds, pencil cases rattled open, and whispered conversations began immediately despite the rule about morning quiet time. But Sophia remained motionless, watching everything with the hyper-vigilant attention of someone much older than 8. Patterns emerge over the next 2 weeks. Mrs. Patterson began documenting small details that troubled her professional instincts. She kept a private notebook, jotting down observations between lessons, building a picture that grew more concerning with each passing day. Sophia's lunches were elaborate affairs that belonged in a magazine spread rather than a school cafeteria. Neatly cut sandwiches with crusts removed, perfectly portioned fruits arranged by color, everything nestled in expensive bento boxes that probably cost more than some families spent on groceries. But the girl barely touched the food, often returning home with containers still full, the careful arrangements undisturbed. "Not hungry today?" Mrs. Patterson asked during one lunch period, settling beside Sophia at the long cafeteria table. The sounds of children eating and chatting created a warm backdrop of normalcy that made Sophia's isolation more pronounced. "I'm practicing self-control," Sophia replied, her voice carrying words that seemed borrowed from an adult vocabulary. "Mother says discipline with food builds character and prepares us for life's challenges." The phrase felt rehearsed, like something she'd heard repeated so many times it had become her own belief. Mrs. Patterson noticed how Sophia's eyes lingered on other children's simpler lunches: peanut, butter sandwiches in plastic bags, apples with small bruises, crackers that left crumbs on fingers, with something that might have been longing. During recess, while other children ran and played with the uninhibited joy that should define childhood, Sophia would stand by the chain-link fence, observing with an analytical expression that seemed far too mature for someone who should be learning hopscotch and tag. When Mrs. Patterson encouraged her to join the games, Sophia would politely decline, with the same careful courtesy she applied to everything. "I prefer to maintain my composure," she'd say, smoothing down her already immaculate uniform with small hands that never seemed to get dirty. Physical exertion can lead to complications. But Mrs. Patterson noticed how Sophia's eyes would follow the other children, a flicker of longing quickly suppressed behind that practiced pleasant mask. Sometimes, when a particularly joyful shriek of laughter would echo across the playground, Sophia would take an unconscious step forward, before catching herself and resuming her statue-like posture. The breakthrough came during their first art lesson. Mrs. Patterson distributed drawing paper and crayons, the familiar ritual of creativity that usually brought out the best in her students. The afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting everything in golden light that made even the most ordinary classroom feel magical. "Today we're going to draw our families," she announced, watching faces light up around the room. "Show me the people who are most important to you." Around the room, children eagerly grabbed crayons with the enthusiasm of young artists, creating cheerful stick figures with bright smiles and colorful clothes that defied reality. Some drew grandparents with exaggerated wrinkles that spoke of love and cookies. Others included pets, dogs with tongues hanging out, cats with whiskers that took up half their faces. The drawings were chaotic, joyful scenes that captured the beautiful messiness of real family life. Sophia approached her paper differently. She selected each crayon with the care of a surgeon choosing instruments, planning her composition like an architect designing a cathedral. Her family portrait was technically perfect. Proportional figures, neat coloring within the lines, every detail precisely rendered with an attention to accuracy that was remarkable for an 8-year-old. Mrs. Patterson walked around the room, admiring each child's work, offering encouragement and asking gentle questions about the stories behind the drawings. When she reached Sophia's desk, she stopped, her breath catching in her throat. The drawing was beautiful, almost too beautiful, and something about it felt profoundly wrong. The perfect picture. Sophia had drawn 3 figures standing in front of a large house that looked like something from a real estate magazine. A tall woman with an elegant dress and perfect posture dominated the center of the composition, every line of her figure speaking of control and refinement. Beside her, a slightly shorter figure, Sophia herself, stood with hands clasped behind her back, wearing what looked like a formal dress, more suitable for a business meeting than childhood play. Between them, a space, carefully outlined in light pencil strokes, but left empty, like a ghost waiting to be filled in. "This is lovely." "Sophia," Mrs. Patterson said carefully, kneeling beside the desk so she could speak at the child's eye level. The empty space seemed to pulse with significance. "Can you tell me about your family?" "This is my mother, Isabella Martinez," Sophia began, pointing to the elegant figure with the tip of her red crayon. "She's very important. She helps other families learn how to be better versions of themselves." Her finger moved to her own image with mathematical precision. "This is me. I'm learning to be perfect like Mother so I can make her proud." Mrs. Patterson's eyes were drawn back to the empty outline, the careful space that spoke of absence and longing. "And who is this supposed to be?" Sophia's crayon paused mid-stroke, her small hand trembling almost imperceptibly. For just a moment, her composed expression flickered, revealing something raw and painful underneath the careful mask. "That's where Daddy goes when he comes home." The use of "not if" made Mrs. Patterson's chest tighten with professional concern. There was something in the child's voice, a hope wrapped in uncertainty, a faith built on sand. "Does Daddy travel for work?" "Mother says he's coming back soon," Sophia replied, her voice steady, but her hand still shaking slightly. "She says I need to be ready to be the perfect daughter he'll want to see when he returns from his important business." The words felt scripted, like lines from a play she'd memorized but didn't fully understand. Mrs. Patterson noticed how Sophia would glance at her drawing throughout the remaining class time, sometimes reaching out to trace the empty outline with her finger, as if trying to fill it with wishes and determination. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Sophia carefully placed her artwork in her folder with the same precision she applied to everything else. "Mother likes to see all my schoolwork," she explained, aligning the edges perfectly. "She says my progress reflects our family's values and commitment to excellence." As children gathered their belongings and headed toward the buses, Mrs. Patterson watched Sophia walk to the pickup line with that same mechanical precision, her backpack perfectly positioned, her posture unnaturally straight for someone so young. When Isabella Martinez arrived, tall, elegant, moving with the confidence of someone accustomed to being watched, Mrs. Patterson observed their interaction from across the crowded pickup area. There was no running embrace, no excited chatter about the day's events. Instead, Isabella bent down to inspect Sophia's uniform, adjusting something invisible before they walked to their car with matching measured steps. After hours' investigation that evening, Mrs. Patterson stayed late in her classroom, grading papers by the warm glow of her desk lamp, while custodial staff worked quietly in distant hallways. Sophia's family portrait sat on top of the stack, and she found herself studying it again, drawn to the technical skill that was remarkable for an 8-year-old. But something about it felt hollow, like a performance, rather than genuine expression of love and connection. She pulled out her laptop, the screen's blue light joining the yellow circle cast by her desk lamp, and searched for Isabella Martinez. What she found made her stomach drop like a stone thrown into deep water. Isabella Martinez was a family counselor and lifestyle blogger with a significant social media following. Her Instagram account boasted over 50,000 followers, all drawn to her inspirational quotes about optimal parenting and raising exceptional children. Professional photos showed Isabella in designer clothes that probably cost more than Mrs. Patterson's monthly salary, speaking at conferences about transforming family dynamics through structured excellence. The posts were perfectly curated, each image filtered and edited to magazine-quality standards. Isabella discussed the importance of maintaining high standards in all areas of family life and shared evidence-based approaches to developing emotional resilience in children. Her bio described her as a transformation specialist, helping families achieve their highest potential. But it was the photos with Sophia that disturbed Mrs. Patterson most deeply. In every image, Sophia looked like a miniature adult, posed perfectly, smiling on cue, wearing expensive clothes that seemed designed more for aesthetic appeal than childhood comfort. The captions praised Sophia's remarkable self-discipline and natural sophistication, describing her as proof that children can achieve excellence when given proper guidance and structure. There were no candid shots, no messy, joyful moments of a child being allowed to simply be a child. No evidence of spontaneous laughter, grass-stained clothes, or the beautiful chaos that should characterize childhood. Everything was staged, controlled, perfect. Mrs. Patterson scrolled through months of posts, her concern growing with each perfectly arranged image. Isabella frequently referenced her challenging journey as a single mother and her commitment to not letting circumstances diminish our family's standards. She spoke about building resilience through structure and the importance of emotional regulation in developing successful individuals. What she didn't mention was a father. Nowhere in the carefully curated online presence was there any reference to Sophia's dad. No photos, no mentions, no acknowledgement that he had ever existed. It was as if Isabella and Sophia existed in a bubble of perfection that had no room for anyone else. Mrs. Patterson leaned back in her chair, the pieces of a troubling puzzle beginning to form a picture she didn't want to see. Her own coffee mug sat cold and forgotten beside her keyboard, the dregs reflecting the overhead lights like a dark mirror. Professional consultation. The next morning, Mrs. Patterson called the school's guidance counselor, Mr. Chen, asking him to meet her before classes began. She spread Sophia's artwork across his desk. the family portrait looking somehow more ominous in the harsh fluorescent light of his office. "I'm probably overreacting," she began, though her professional instincts told her otherwise. But something feels fundamentally wrong here. Mr. Chen studied the family portrait with the trained eye of someone who had seen too many children struggling with invisible burdens. His expression grew serious as she explained her observations: the mechanical behavior, the formal speech patterns, the untouched lunches, the social media presence that felt more like performance art than genuine family life. "The empty figure is concerning," he agreed, running his finger along the carefully outlined space where a father should be, "combined with the behavioral patterns you're describing. And this online persona," he gestured to her phone, where Isabella's Instagram posts still glowed with their perfect, artificial light. "She's like a little adult," Mrs. Patterson continued, her voice heavy with concern. "She never relaxes, never seems to just enjoy being 8 years old. And that mother," she showed him the social media posts, the endless stream of advice about raising exceptional children. Family counselors can sometimes struggle with applying their professional expectations to their personal lives, Mr. Chen said carefully, his words measured and diplomatic. "The pressure to be a perfect example can become overwhelming, especially for single parents who feel they're being watched and judged." They decided to implement subtle interventions, giving Sophia opportunities for less structured activities, observing her interactions more closely, and creating safe spaces for her to express herself more naturally. Most importantly, they would document everything, building a case file that might become necessary if their concerns proved founded. Sometimes children in overly controlled environments develop coping mechanisms that look like exceptional maturity, Mr. Chen explained, his voice carrying the weight of years spent helping children navigate impossible expectations. But underneath, they're often carrying burdens no child should bear. As Mrs. Patterson returned to her classroom, she made a mental note to pay closer attention, not just to what Sophia said, but to what she didn't say, the silences that often spoke louder than words, the spaces between carefully chosen phrases where real feelings might be hiding. The morning bell rang, and children began filing into the classroom with their usual mixture of energy and sleepiness. But when Sophia appeared in the doorway, moving with that same mechanical precision, Mrs. Patterson saw her differently now, not as a remarkably well-behaved child, but as someone who might be drowning in expectations she was too young to understand. Cracks in the facade. During the following week's art class, Mrs. Patterson decided to try something different. Instead of giving the children a specific assignment with clear parameters and expected outcomes, she simply said, "Draw whatever makes you happy." The response around the room was immediate and joyful. Most children grabbed their crayons and began creating scenes of playgrounds, with swings reaching toward cotton ball clouds, beloved pets with exaggerated features that spoke of pure love, ice cream cones taller than buildings, or wild adventures featuring themselves as superheroes saving the day. The room filled with the comfortable chatter of children lost in creative expression. Sophia sat frozen, staring at her blank paper with what looked like genuine confusion. Her hand hovered over the box of crayons, but she made no move to select one. Around her, other children were already deep into their artwork, but she remained motionless, as if the open-ended nature of the assignment had short-circuited something in her carefully programmed responses. "Zii, what should make me happy?" she asked finally, her voice smaller than usual, carrying a vulnerability that made Mrs. Patterson's heart ache. "Anything at all?" Mrs. Patterson encouraged gently, kneeling beside Sophia's desk. "There's no right or wrong answer. Just draw something that brings you joy." For 15 long minutes, Sophia sat motionless, while creativity bloomed around her. Other children chatted and laughed, sharing crayons and comparing their work with the easy camaraderie of childhood friendship. But Sophia seemed paralyzed by the freedom, as if joy was a foreign concept she couldn't quite grasp. Finally, with trembling hands that betrayed the effort this simple task required, she began to draw. The image that emerged was startling in its simplicity and heartbreaking in its honesty. A small figure, clearly herself, sitting alone in what appeared to be a large, empty room. The figure was much smaller and more vulnerable than the poised child in her family portrait, drawn with uncertain lines that spoke of loneliness and confusion. In the corner of the room, she drew a tiny door, slightly ajar, as if something might be waiting just beyond sight. "Tell me about your drawing." "Sophia?" Mrs. Patterson said gently, settling into a child-sized chair beside her. "Sometimes I sit in my room and listen," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible above the classroom sounds. "Mother talks on the phone about important things. Sometimes she cries when she thinks I can't hear." This admission broke Mrs. Patterson's heart. Here was a child who had been trained to be perfect, to never show weakness or cause problems, but who was acutely aware of her mother's hidden pain. The weight of that awareness was visible in the slump of her small shoulders. "Do you ever cry, Sophia?" The girl's eyes widened, as if the question was foreign, dangerous somehow. "Perfect daughters don't cry. Crying means you're not being strong enough to handle life's challenges appropriately." The formal language, borrowed from adult vocabulary, made Mrs. Patterson want to weep for this child, who had been robbed of the simple right to feel her own emotions. Mother's visit. The parent-teacher conferences were scheduled for the following week, and Mrs. Patterson approached the meeting with Sophia's mother with careful preparation. Isabella Martinez arrived precisely on time, not early, not late, but exactly at her scheduled appointment. She was dressed in a tailored blazer that screamed expensive taste and carried a leather portfolio that looked like it cost more than some teacher's weekly salary. She moved through the school hallway like she was walking onto a stage, her heels clicking with confidence against the polished floors. Other parents moved aside unconsciously, intimidated by her presence, or perhaps simply recognizing someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "Mrs. Patterson." Isabella's voice was warm, but carried an undertone of evaluation, as if she were assessing the teacher's worthiness to educate her exceptional child. "I'm so pleased to finally meet Sophia's instructor. I trust she's been exemplary in all respects." "Sophia is a remarkable child," Mrs. Patterson began carefully, gesturing to the small conference table where student work was displayed. "She's clearly intelligent and well-behaved. I wanted to discuss some observations about her social and emotional development." Isabella's smile tightened almost imperceptibly, a practiced expression that suggested she was accustomed to deflecting concerns about her parenting. "Observations." Mrs. Patterson chose her words with the care of someone navigating a minefield. "Sophia seems to put tremendous pressure on herself to be perfect. I'm wondering if we might find ways to help her feel more comfortable being a typical 8-year-old. Perhaps opportunities to make mistakes without consequences, to play without worrying about appearances." "I'm not sure I understand," Isabella replied, her tone cooling by several degrees. "Sophia's maturity and self-discipline are strengths, not problems to be solved. In today's competitive world, children benefit from learning excellence early. Of course, and Sophia is certainly capable of excellent work," Mrs. Patterson agreed diplomatically. "I simply noticed that she seems hesitant to engage in play, and she often appears anxious about making even small mistakes. For instance, when she spilled water on her paper last week, she seemed genuinely distressed." "Anxiety about mistakes indicates healthy conscientiousness," Isabella interrupted, her professional persona taking over. "Too many children today lack any sense of standards or accountability. Sophia understands that excellence requires effort and attention to detail." Mrs. Patterson tried a different approach, one that might reveal more about the family dynamic. In her family drawing, she included an outline for her father. "I was wondering about your family structure, just so I can better support Sophia's emotional needs." The change in Isabella was immediate and startling. Her composed expression cracked for just a moment, revealing something raw and painful underneath the polished exterior. Her hands tightened on her portfolio, knuckles going white with the force of her grip. "Sophia's father he's temporarily absent," Isabella said, her voice tight and controlled, but carrying edges of something that sounded like barely contained panic. "We're managing beautifully without him. Sophia doesn't need. She's better off focusing on attainable goals rather than unreliable people." The bitterness in those last words revealed more than Isabella probably intended. Mrs. Patterson caught a glimpse of pain so deep it made her own chest ache in sympathy. The truth emerges after the conference. Mrs. Patterson felt more concerned than ever. The meeting had raised more questions than it answered, and Isabella's reaction to questions about Sophia's father suggested layers of complexity that went far beyond a simple family structure issue. That night, she called her friend Maria, who worked in family services and had connections throughout the local social work community. "Isabella Martinez," Maria said thoughtfully when Mrs. Patterson described the situation, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too many families struggling with hidden trauma. "I don't know her personally, but I've heard the name in professional circles. Give me a day to make some discreet inquiries." The next afternoon, Maria called back with information that made Mrs. Patterson's suspicions crystallize into something much more heartbreaking than she had imagined. Isabella's husband, Sophia's father, died in a car accident about 18 months ago, Maria said quietly, her voice heavy with the kind of sadness that comes from delivering difficult news. "From what I could gather, it was sudden and traumatic. A drunk driver ran a red light downtown during evening rush hour." Mrs. Patterson felt her stomach drop. "And Sophia? That's where it gets complicated," Maria continued. "Isabella apparently threw herself into her work after the accident and developed this public persona around optimal parenting. Some colleagues have expressed concern that she's using her professional success to avoid processing her grief." "What about counseling? Therapy?" "Isabella provides counseling to other families, but there's no record of her seeking help for herself or Sophia. Some people in the field think she believes she should be able to handle everything alone, especially given her professional credentials." Mrs. Patterson thought about Sophia's empty outline in the family portrait, the careful space left for someone who would never fill it. "And Sophia? No one seems to have considered how the child is coping," Maria said with the frustration of someone who had seen too many children's needs overlooked in the wake of adult trauma. "Isabella presents such a competent image that everyone assumes Sophia is fine. But losing a parent at 6 or 7, then being expected to maintain impossible standards while your surviving parent builds a career around perfect parenting." Mrs. Patterson felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with sickening clarity. Sophia's perfect behavior, her fear of making mistakes, her confusion about what made her happy, these weren't signs of exceptional maturity. They were signs of a child desperately trying to live up to impossible expectations while quietly grieving a loss no one was allowing her to acknowledge. "What can I do?" Mrs. Patterson asked, though she suspected the answer would be more complicated than she hoped. "Document everything. Create opportunities for Sophia to express herself safely. And be prepared. If this situation is as concerning as it sounds, there may come a time when you need to take formal action to protect that child's emotional well-being." The breaking point. The following Monday, Sophia arrived at school looking even more tightly controlled than usual. Her braid was so severe it pulled at the corners of her eyes, giving her face an almost mask-like quality. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, every crease sharp enough to cut paper, and her backpack was positioned with military precision. But Mrs. Patterson noticed her hands shaking slightly as she arranged her supplies with obsessive care. During morning circle time, Mrs. Patterson made a decision that felt both necessary and risky. "Today, we're going to talk about feelings," she announced, watching the children settle on the colorful carpet. Everyone has different emotions, and they're all normal and okay to have. She began reading a book about a child dealing with sadness after losing someone important. The story was gentle but honest, describing how the character missed someone who was no longer there, how grief felt too big for a small body, and how it was okay to cry when you missed someone you loved. Mrs. Patterson watched Sophia's face carefully as the story progressed. The child sat with her usual perfect posture, but tiny cracks began appearing in her composure. When the book mentioned the character crying and being comforted by understanding adults, Sophia made a small, involuntary sound, almost like a sob that had been caught and swallowed before it could escape. "Sophia, are you all right?" Mrs. Patterson asked gently, pausing in her reading. "I'm fine," Sophia replied automatically, but her voice was strained, carrying undertones of something much deeper than fine. "Perfect daughters don't get sad about stories, but it's okay to feel sad sometimes," Mrs. Patterson said carefully, aware that every child in the circle was listening. "Even when we're trying to be strong for other people." "No," Sophia said, her voice rising slightly with the first genuine emotion Mrs. Patterson had heard from her. "Mother says crying means you're giving up. Daddy wouldn't want. He wouldn't want a daughter who gives up on being strong." The slip was slight but significant, wouldn't instead of won't, present tense slipping into past tense, revealing knowledge she wasn't supposed to have. "Sophia," Mrs. Patterson said very carefully, setting the book aside and giving the child her full attention, "can you tell me about your daddy?" And then, like a dam that had been holding back an ocean, Sophia began to talk, the secret revealed. "Daddy used to read me stories," Sophia whispered, her perfect posture finally slumping as if an invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "He would do funny voices for all the characters and let me stay up past bedtime when the stories got really good. He said I was his sunshine girl because my smile could make any cloudy day bright." Tears began flowing down her cheeks, and she wiped them frantically with the backs of her hands, as if they were evidence of some terrible failure that might get her in trouble. "Mother says I have to be perfect, so Daddy will be proud when he comes back," Sophia continued, her voice breaking with the effort of holding back 18 months of suppressed grief. "She says if I'm not good enough, if I'm not strong enough, then maybe he won't want to come home to us." Mrs. Patterson's heart broke as the full picture became clear. This child had been carrying an impossible burden, believing that her father's absence was somehow connected to her own worthiness, that perfection might bring him back, that her behavior could somehow influence events completely beyond her control. "Sophia," Mrs. Patterson said gently, moving to kneel beside the girl while other children watched, with the solemn attention that children bring to moments they sense are important. "Where do you think Daddy is right now?" Sophia's composure completely shattered. Through gulping sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her small body should be able to contain, she whispered, "Mother says he's on a very important business trip. That he'll come back when I'm ready, when I've learned to be the perfect daughter he wants, but sometimes I hear her crying and talking to his picture, and she says things like, 'I can't do this without you,' and 'Why did you leave us alone?'" The classroom had grown quiet, other children sensing the weight of what was happening without fully understanding the adult complexities involved. Several of them moved closer to Sophia, their natural empathy drawing them towards someone in pain. "And I think maybe Daddy can't come back," Sophia continued through her tears. "Maybe he's like Emma's grandpa who went to heaven after he got sick. But Mother gets so upset when I ask questions about it, so I try to be perfect instead. If I'm perfect enough, maybe she won't be so sad all the time." Mrs. Patterson felt tears in her own eyes. This 8-year-old child had been living in an impossible limbo, denied the chance to grieve her father while carrying the burden of believing his return depended on her perfection. More than that, she had been trying to manage her mother's grief as well, carrying emotional responsibilities that no child should ever bear. "Sophia, honey, can you tell me your daddy's name?" "Miguel," Sophia said through her tears, and the name came out like a prayer, like something precious she had been forbidden to speak aloud. Miguel Antonio Martinez. He was the best daddy in the whole world, and I miss him so much it makes my stomach hurt every single day. The use of past tense was gentle but definitive. Somewhere in her heart, despite all the confusion and mixed messages, Sophia knew the truth her mother couldn't face. The confrontation that afternoon. Mrs. Patterson requested an emergency meeting with Isabella. When Isabella arrived, her usual polished demeanor was in place, but Mrs. Patterson could see hairline cracks in the facade, a slight tremor in her hands, shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, a brittleness to her smile that suggested it might shatter at any moment. Sophia was quite emotional today, Mrs. Patterson began carefully, choosing her words like someone diffusing a bomb. She talked about her father. Sophia sometimes gets confused, Isabella interrupted quickly, her voice carrying the sharp edge of panic barely held in check. She's been through a difficult period of adjustment, but we're managing everything perfectly fine. Isabella, Mrs. Patterson said, using the woman's first name deliberately, hoping to reach the grieving mother underneath the professional facade. Sophia told me about Miguel. The name hit Isabella like a physical blow. She went white, her carefully applied makeup suddenly looking like a mask against pale skin. Her hands began to shake visibly, and she gripped the edge of the conference table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. What did she say? Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. She said he was the best daddy in the whole world, and that she misses him terribly. Isabella's carefully constructed facade began to crumble like a house of cards in a strong wind. She's not supposed to. Isabella, Sophia knows, Mrs. Patterson said as gently as possible. Maybe not all the details, but she knows he's not coming back. And she's been trying to be perfect because she thinks it's her fault he's gone. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge over an impossible chasm. Isabella stared at Mrs. Patterson, her professional composure completely shattered, revealing the broken woman underneath. I can't, Isabella whispered, her voice carrying 18 months of suppressed agony. I can't tell her the truth. Because if I say it out loud, if I admit that he's really gone forever, then I have to figure out how to live without him. And I don't know how to do that. But Sophia is already living without him, Mrs. Patterson said gently but firmly. And she's doing it while carrying the impossible burden of believing she has to earn his love through perfection. That her behavior might somehow bring him back. Isabella broke down completely then, 18 months of suppressed grief pouring out in Mrs. Patterson's classroom. It was the kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than tears. The sound of a soul finally admitting to its own brokenness, the beginning of healing over the next hour. Isabella finally shared the truth she'd been avoiding, the words coming out in broken pieces between sobs. Miguel had died in a car accident on his way home from work, sudden and senseless and completely beyond anyone's control. Isabella had been so overwhelmed by her own grief and the pressure to continue functioning that she'd convinced herself that protecting Sophia from the truth was the right choice. I thought, if she didn't have to face the permanence of it, maybe she could have a normal childhood, Isabella sobbed, her professional demeanor completely stripped away. But instead, I've turned her into a little robot, haven't I? I've made her responsible for managing my emotions. You've both been protecting each other, Mrs. Patterson said compassionately, offering tissues from the box she kept for difficult conversations. But protection without truth becomes a prison for everyone involved. They developed a plan that felt both overwhelming and necessary. Isabella would begin grief counseling for both herself and Sophia, working with professionals who understood childhood bereavement. They would create space for Sophia to be a normal 8-year-old, to make mistakes, to play without purpose, to express emotions without judgment or fear of consequences. Most importantly, they would honor Miguel's memory honestly, allowing Sophia to grieve the father she'd lost while celebrating the love they'd shared. They would look at photos together, tell stories about him, and acknowledge that missing him was a normal, healthy response to losing someone you love. She talks about him in past tense sometimes, Isabella admitted, her voice raw from crying. I think she's been waiting for permission to miss him openly. Children are often wiser than we give them credit for, Mrs. Patterson replied. Sophia's been carrying your grief along with her own. Maybe it's time to let her be a child instead of your emotional caretaker. The conversation continued as afternoon shadows lengthened across the classroom floor. Two women working together to figure out how to help a child heal from losses she'd never been allowed to acknowledge. The new drawing 2 weeks later. During art class, Mrs. Patterson gave the children another family portrait assignment. This time, she watched as Sophia approached her paper with a different energy, still careful, but no longer rigid with fear, instead of the mechanical precision that had characterized her previous work. Sophia moved with the focused concentration of someone finally free to tell the truth. She drew the same house, recognizable from her earlier portrait, and the same elegant mother figure. But now, instead of an empty outline, she drew her father as she remembered him, smiling broadly, arms outstretched as if ready for one of the hugs she missed so desperately. Above his figure, she carefully wrote in her neat handwriting, "In my heart always." Beside the father figure, she drew herself differently too. Instead of the formal, rigid posture of her previous drawings, this Sophia was running toward her father, hair flying loose from its braid, arms wide, captured mid-laugh. It was the first time Mrs. Patterson had seen Sophia draw herself in motion. And the difference was striking. "This is how Daddy and I used to play in the backyard," she explained to Mrs. Patterson, her voice soft but no longer strained with the effort of maintaining perfection. "Mother says it's okay to remember the happy times now, that remembering doesn't make the sadness worse." "And how does that feel?" Mrs. Patterson asked, genuinely curious about this transformation. "Sad," Sophia said honestly, considering the question with the thoughtfulness that had always been part of her nature. "But also, good sad, like when you miss someone, but you're grateful you got to love them in the first place. The emotional maturity was still there, but now it felt authentic rather than performed, born from genuine experience rather than borrowed from adult expectations." At the bottom of the page, Sophia had written a message in her careful handwriting. "Families are about love, not perfection." Mrs. Patterson felt tears prick her eyes as she realized how far this child had come in such a short time. Mother and daughter, healing Isabella, had begun attending grief counseling and had made the difficult decision to completely restructure her social media presence. Instead of tips for perfect parenting and inspirational quotes about raising exceptional children, she began sharing honest reflections about loss, healing, and learning to embrace the beautiful imperfection of real family life. The response from her followers had been overwhelming. Thousands of messages from other parents struggling with their own hidden pain, grateful for permission to be less than perfect. One afternoon, she picked Sophia up from school and they sat together in the car for a moment before driving home. It had become their new ritual, a few minutes of transition time to reconnect after being apart. "How was your day, mi amor?" Isabella asked, using the Spanish endearment Miguel had favored. It had taken months of therapy before she could speak his pet names aloud again. "I got paint on my shirt during art class," Sophia said, then quickly added with a small smile, "But Mrs. Patterson says mistakes make life interesting and prove that we're really trying new things." "What do you think about that?" Isabella asked, genuinely curious about her daughter's perspective. Sophia considered this seriously, her brow furrowed in the way it always did when she was thinking deeply. "I think maybe mistakes mean you're really living instead of just being scared of living wrong." Isabella smiled, and for the first time in months it reached her eyes completely. The expression transformed her face, making her look younger and more at peace. "Your daddy would be so proud of how brave you're being. Do you think he knows? About how I'm learning to be myself instead of perfect all the time?" "I think," Isabella said carefully, choosing words that honored both truth and hope, that Daddy always loved you exactly as you were. The perfect behavior was something I needed because I was scared, not something he would have wanted for you. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts, the afternoon sun warming the car around them. "Mama," Sophia said quietly, her voice carrying a question she'd been building courage to ask. "Yes, baby? Is it okay if I miss him sometimes? Even if it makes you sad too?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but they were cleaner tears than she'd cried in months, tears of healing rather than despair. "It's not just okay, Mija. It's necessary. Missing him means we loved him, and love doesn't stop just because someone can't be with us anymore." The revelation. 3 months later, Mrs. Patterson was grading papers when she came across another family drawing from Sophia. This one showed their household as it really was now, Isabella and Sophia together, but with Miguel's presence indicated throughout their daily life. Photos of him smiled from walls. His favorite coffee mug sat on the kitchen table, and a butterfly hovered nearby. Sophia had recently learned that many cultures viewed butterflies as symbols of departed loved ones visiting from heaven. What struck Mrs. Patterson most was that this family looked genuinely real. Sophia had drawn herself with messy hair from playing outside and a grass-stained dress that spoke of actual childhood adventures. Isabella was shown laughing, not posing for an invisible camera, but caught in a moment of genuine joy. The house felt lived in rather than staged, warm rather than perfect, but it was Sophia's written explanation on the back that brought tears to Mrs. Patterson's eyes. "This is my real family now. Daddy lives in our hearts instead of in our house, but he's still part of everything we do. Some days we're sad and some days we're happy, and Mother says that's completely normal. Families are built on love and memories and truth, not on rules and being perfect all the time. I think Daddy would like our family better now because we're honest about missing him instead of pretending everything is fine." Mrs. Patterson made a note to share this breakthrough with the school counselor. Sophia's progress was remarkable, but more importantly, she was finally being allowed to grieve, heal, and grow at her own pace rather than according to someone else's timeline. The friendship around this time. Sophia began developing her first real friendship. Emma, a classmate who was known for her infectious laugh and complete disregard for keeping her clothes clean, had begun inviting Sophia to join her group at recess. Emma had the kind of natural empathy that drew her to children who seemed lonely, and she'd been persistently kind to Sophia even when her invitations were politely declined. "Want to play on the swings today?" Emma asked one Tuesday afternoon, her face still flushed from running around the playground. "We're pretending they're rocket ships that can take us to different planets." For the first time since Mrs. Patterson had known her, Sophia didn't hesitate to consider the invitation. "Yes, but I might get my dress dirty," she said, glancing down at her school uniform. "So," Emma grinned, spreading her arms to show off her own grass-stained shirt and mud-splattered shoes. "Dirty clothes mean you had the most fun. My mom says she can tell how good my day was by how messy I am when I get home." Mrs. Patterson watched from across the playground as Sophia pumped her legs on the swing, her carefully maintained braid coming loose in the wind. When Emma challenged her to see who could swing higher, Sophia actually laughed, a genuine, uninhibited sound that carried across the playground and made several teachers turn to look, amazed to hear such joy from a child they'd thought incapable of it. Later, when Isabella came to pick up Sophia and saw grass stains on her daughter's uniform and leaves in her hair, her first reaction was the old panic, a flutter of anxiety about appearances and what other parents might think. Then she caught herself, remembering their counselor's words about letting children be children. "Did you have fun today?" she asked instead, crouching down to Sophia's eye level. "The most fun ever," Sophia replied, her face glowing with genuine happiness. "Emma taught me how to do the monkey bars, and I fell off 3 times, but I kept trying until I made it across 2 rungs. Tomorrow, she's going to teach me how to climb the rope wall 3 times. Isabella's voice carried just a note of her old anxiety. "Mother," Sophia said gently, reaching out to touch her mom's hand with the wisdom of someone who had learned important lessons about fear and courage. "Remember what we learned in counseling? Falling down is how we learn to get back up. And getting back up is how we get stronger." Isabella paused, then smiled with genuine pride rather than the performative pleasure she used to display for social media. "You're absolutely right, Mija. Tell me more about these monkey bars." The memory boxes part of their healing process. Isabella and Sophia created a memory box for Miguel. They filled it with photos that captured real moments rather than posed perfection. Miguel laughing at one of Sophia's silly jokes, flour in his hair from a disastrous attempt at making pancakes, asleep on the couch with Sophia curled against his chest during a movie night. They added letters he'd written to Sophia, birthday cards with his terrible handwriting, small mementos from their life together, a ticket stub from their last movie together, a pressed flower from their garden, his reading glasses that still smelled faintly of his cologne. But most importantly, they began adding new items, drawings Sophia made for him, letters she wrote telling him about her school day and her new friends, flowers from their garden that they pressed between the pages of books. The memory box became a living connection rather than a shrine to the past. "It's like he's still part of our family," Sophia explained to Mrs. Patterson during one of their regular check-in meetings, "just in a different way than before." "How does that feel compared to waiting for him to come back?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Better," Sophia said with startling honesty, "because now I can love him and miss him without feeling like I'm doing something wrong or like I need to fix it. Missing people you love is normal." Isabella, who was present for this conversation, squeezed her daughter's hand. The gesture was spontaneous, unposed, and spoke of a relationship that was finally becoming authentic. "We're learning that love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes shape." Mrs. Patterson marveled at how both mother and daughter had grown. Isabella was learning to be vulnerable, to show her own emotions instead of demanding perfection from everyone around her. And Sophia was blossoming into a genuine child, creative, playful, sometimes rebellious in small, healthy ways that showed she was developing her own sense of self. "Mrs. Patterson," Sophia said as they prepared to leave, "thank you for helping us learn how to be real instead of perfect. I think being real is much better, even when it's harder sometimes." The setback, not everything was smooth sailing. About 4 months after the initial breakthrough, Sophia had what Isabella later described as a grief attack, a sudden, overwhelming wave of sadness that left her sobbing in the school bathroom during lunch period. Mrs. Patterson found her there, curled up in the corner of a stall, crying as if her heart was breaking all over again. The sound of her sobs echoed off the tile walls, raw and primal, in a way that reminded Mrs. Patterson that grief doesn't follow a straight line toward healing. "Sophia, sweetheart, what's wrong?" Mrs. Patterson asked gently, settling on the cold bathroom floor beside the child without concern for her dress. "Emma's daddy is coming to our class presentation tomorrow," Sophia sobbed, her words coming out in broken pieces between gasps. "And I remembered how Daddy used to help me practice my speeches in the mirror, and how he would sit in the front row and make funny faces to make me laugh when I got nervous, and I just want him to be there so badly it feels like my chest is going to explode." Mrs. Patterson sat quietly beside Sophia, offering her presence rather than trying to fix the unfixable. "Missing him this much shows how deeply you loved each other. But it hurts so much sometimes," Sophia whispered, her voice small and lost. "Mother says it's normal, but it feels too big for my body to hold." "It is too big," Mrs. Patterson agreed honestly. "Grief is always too big for any one person to carry alone. That's why we help each other, and why it's okay to cry when you need to." They sat together until Sophia's tears subsided. Then Mrs. Patterson helped her wash her face and called Isabella to let her know what had happened. These episodes, their counselor had explained, were part of the healing process. Sophia was finally allowing herself to feel the full weight of her loss, which was necessary but periodically overwhelming. The presentation. The next day, Emma's father arrived for the class presentation about family traditions. Sophia felt her chest tighten as she watched Emma run to hug him, her face lighting up with the unguarded joy of a child secure in her parents' love. But instead of the crushing sadness she expected, Sophia found herself feeling something different, not jealousy, but a kind of bittersweet appreciation for the love she could witness during her turn to present. Sophia spoke about their new family tradition of visiting Miguel's grave every Sunday, bringing fresh flowers and telling him about their week. Her voice was steady as she explained how they would sit on the grass and share both happy news and sad moments, treating him as someone who was still part of their lives, even though he couldn't respond. "My daddy can't be here in person anymore," she said, her voice carrying the hard-won wisdom of someone who had learned to hold both sadness and acceptance. "But we carry him with us everywhere we go. That's our family tradition now, remembering love and letting it change how we live." After the presentations, Emma's father approached Sophia with the gentle kindness of someone who recognized courage when he saw it. "That was beautiful, honey. Your daddy sounds like he was a wonderful man who loved you very much." "He was," Sophia replied simply, without the desperate need for validation that had once characterized her responses. "I miss him every single day, but I'm grateful I got to be his daughter for the time we had together." Mrs. Patterson, watching from across the room, felt proud of how far Sophia had come. She was learning to hold both grief and gratitude simultaneously, a skill many adults struggled with. Managed here with the natural wisdom of a child, allowed to feel her emotions honestly. The anniversary, as the second anniversary of Miguel's death approached, Isabella worried about how to handle it. The first anniversary had passed in a haze of denial and forced normalcy. This year, she wanted to honor both Miguel's memory and their family's journey toward healing. "What would you like to do on Daddy's Remembrance Day?" Isabella asked Sophia one evening as they looked through photo albums together, a new ritual that had replaced their old habit of avoiding reminders of Miguel. "Can we make his favorite breakfast and eat it in the backyard where we used to have picnics?" Sophia asked, her voice thoughtful rather than sad. "And maybe plant new flowers in the garden he started. I think he would like knowing that beautiful things are still growing." Isabella was surprised by the thoughtful, life-affirming requests. She had expected something more mournful, but Sophia seemed to understand instinctively that honoring someone's memory could be about celebrating life rather than dwelling in sadness. "That sounds perfect, mi amor. And maybe we could invite Mrs. Patterson? She's been such an important part of our healing journey." "Yes," Sophia said immediately. "She helped save our family by teaching us how to be honest with each other." On the anniversary, Mrs. Patterson joined them for what turned out to be a beautiful morning of remembrance. They shared stories about Miguel that made them laugh through their tears, looked at photos that captured his infectious sense of humor, and planted marigolds in the garden he had started the spring before he died. "This feels right," Isabella said as they worked together in the soil, their hands dirty and their hearts lighter than they had been in years. "Sad but right. Like we're honoring him by continuing to live and grow." Daddy always said flowers grow better when you water them with both sunshine and rain, Sophia added, her small hands carefully patting soil around the seedlings. "I think that's true for families too." The growth by the beginning of the next school year, Sophia had transformed in ways that went far beyond her emotional healing. She was elected to the student council, had made several close friends, and had even joined the school's art club, something she never would have considered when perfection was her only goal and mistakes felt dangerous. "She's become quite the leader," her new teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, told Mrs. Patterson during a hallway conversation. "The other children look up to her, but not because she's perfect. They respect her because she's kind and honest about her struggles. And she helps other kids feel okay about making mistakes." Mrs. Patterson smiled. remembering the rigid, controlled child who had sat in her classroom just over a year ago. Sophia has learned that real strength comes from authenticity, not from hiding your true self. She mentioned you in her writing assignment yesterday, Ms. Rodriguez continued. She wrote about teachers who see children's hearts instead of just their behavior. It was quite moving. She said you saved her family by teaching them the difference between being perfect and being loved. That afternoon, Mrs. Patterson found a note in her mailbox from Sophia, written in the looser, more natural handwriting that had replaced her old, rigid precision. Dear Mrs. Patterson, thank you for helping me learn that perfect daughters don't exist, but loved daughters do. You saved our family by teaching us how to be real with each other instead of pretending everything was fine. I'm still sad about Daddy sometimes, but now it's the kind of sad that means love, instead of the kind that means something is wrong with me. Love always, Sophia, who got paint in her hair yesterday and laughed about it instead of crying. Isabella's transformation. Isabella had undergone her own remarkable transformation. Her social media presence had evolved from promoting perfect parenting to advocating for mental health awareness in families dealing with loss. She began speaking at conferences about the dangers of performative parenting and the healing power of vulnerability, sharing her own story as a cautionary tale about the damage that can be done when grief is hidden behind facades of perfection. I thought I was protecting my daughter by maintaining control and high standards, she shared during one particularly powerful presentation. Instead, I was teaching her that love was conditional on perfection, that her worth depended on her ability to manage my emotions. Real protection comes from teaching children that they are worthy of love exactly as they are, especially when they're struggling. Her work took on new depth and authenticity. Parents who had previously admired her from a distance began reaching out for genuine help rather than tips for appearing successful. Her practice grew as word spread about her willingness to address the real challenges families face rather than offering surface-level solutions. The irony, Isabella told Mrs. Patterson during one of their occasional coffee meetings, is that I'm a much better family counselor now that I've admitted I don't have all the answers. When I was trying to be perfect, I couldn't really help anyone because I wasn't being honest about how hard life can be. And a much better mother, Mrs. Patterson observed, stirring sugar into her coffee. Yes, Isabella agreed with a smile that carried both sadness and peace. Turns out children need mothers who are human, not perfect. They need to see that adults struggle too, and that struggling doesn't mean failing. The new student. The following September, a new student joined Mrs. Patterson's class. 7-year-old Marcus sat rigidly in his chair, answered informal sentences that sounded borrowed from adult conversations, and showed the same concerning signs of over-control that Sophia had displayed 2 years earlier, during art time. When Mrs. Patterson asked the children to draw their families, Marcus created a technically perfect image of 2 adults and himself, all standing at attention like soldiers awaiting inspection. There was no warmth in the drawing, no indication of love or joy, just 3 figures arranged with military precision. Beautiful work. Marcus, Mrs. Patterson said, recognizing the signs she now knew to watch for. Can you tell me about your family? We are a high-achieving household, Marcus replied in words that clearly weren't his own. Excellence is our standard in all areas of life, and we don't accept mediocrity or emotional displays that indicate weakness. Mrs. Patterson felt the familiar concern stirring, the professional instinct that had served her so well with Sophia. She glanced across the room at where Sophia used to sit, now occupied by another child, and made a mental note to call Mr. Chen about Marcus. Sophia, Mrs. Patterson called to where the girl was visiting as a volunteer helper, now in 4th grade, but still connected to her old classroom. Would you like to show Marcus around during recess? Maybe help him meet some of the other children? Sophia approached Marcus with the natural empathy that had developed through her own healing journey. She'd become the kind of child who noticed when others were struggling, who offered kindness without expecting anything in return. "Want to see something cool?" she asked Marcus with genuine enthusiasm. "I'm working on a painting that shows my family being silly together instead of perfect." "It's much more fun than perfect." Marcus looked confused, his young face serious beyond his years. "Families are supposed to maintain dignity and proper standards." "Says who?" Sophia asked with the kind of curiosity that comes from having learned to question assumptions. "My mama used to think that too, but then we learned that families are supposed to be loving and honest. Love is way more fun than being serious all the time." Mrs. Patterson watched as Sophia, without even realizing it, began offering Marcus the same gift of authenticity that had saved her own childhood. Full circle. As the school year progressed, Mrs. Patterson watched Marcus begin to relax under Sophia's gentle friendship and her own careful attention. It was beautiful to see how Sophia's own healing had equipped her to help another child struggling with similar issues. Though Marcus's situation involved different family pressures, during one lunch period, Mrs. Patterson overheard Sophia talking to Marcus about emotions in a way that showed how much she had internalized the lessons of her own healing. "My counselor says feelings are like weather," Sophia was explaining, sharing her sandwich with Marcus, whose own lunch was as elaborate and untouched as hers used to be. "Sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it rains, sometimes there are storms. But the weather always changes, and all of it is normal." "My parents say strong people don't have emotional storms," Marcus replied quietly, unconsciously echoing the rigid thinking that had once trapped Sophia. "That's not true," Sophia said with gentle authority, her voice carrying the wisdom of experience. "Strong people learn how to dance in the rain instead of pretending it's not raining." "Want me to show you?" And right there in the cafeteria, Sophia began doing a silly little dance, twirling and laughing with the uninhibited joy that had once seemed impossible for her. Other children joined in, and eventually even Marcus cracked a small smile, the first genuine expression Mrs. Patterson had seen from him. Mrs. Patterson felt her heart swell with pride and amazement. Sophia had become exactly what she was meant to be. Not perfect, but authentic, resilient, and profoundly kind. The recognition in the spring. Isabella was invited to speak at a national conference about family resilience and the dangers of perfectionist parenting. She asked if Sophia would be willing to join her on stage, not as a prop to demonstrate perfect parenting, but as a partner in sharing their story of healing and transformation. "Are you sure you want to do this, mija?" Isabella asked as they prepared for the trip. "It means talking about Daddy and our difficult times in front of hundreds of people." Sophia considered this seriously, her face thoughtful in the way it always was when she was weighing important decisions. "Will it help other families who are stuck like we were? Kids who think they have to be perfect and mamas who are scared to be sad." "I think it might help a lot of families, then yes. But I want to tell the real truth, not make our story sound prettier than it was." On the day of the presentation, Isabella introduced Sophia not as her exceptional daughter, but as her brave partner in learning what real family healing looks like. Sophia took the microphone with confidence that came from authenticity rather than performance, her voice clear and strong as she addressed the audience of family counselors, educators, and parents. "My daddy died when I was 6, she began simply, without preamble or apology. My mama thought she could protect me by making everything perfect and not talking about how sad we were. But perfect isn't real, and you can't heal from something you're pretending didn't happen." She spoke about the loneliness of trying to be flawless, the exhaustion of managing her mother's emotions while suppressing her own, and the relief of finally being allowed to grieve openly. She talked about learning the difference between being strong and being perfect, between protecting someone and enabling their avoidance. "Mrs. Patterson saved us by seeing that I was really sad, even though I looked perfect on the outside," Sophia concluded, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. Sometimes grown-ups need teachers to help them remember that children are supposed to be children, not tiny adults who fix everything for the big people. The standing ovation that followed wasn't for a performance. It was recognition of genuine courage, wisdom, and the kind of healing that transforms not just individuals, but entire family systems. The letter 3 years after that first family portrait, Mrs. Patterson received a letter that would become one of her most treasured possessions. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, delivered by Sophia herself, now 11 years old and glowing with the confidence that comes from being truly known and loved. The letter was written in Sophia's handwriting, which had evolved from rigid perfection to something more natural and expressive. Dear Mrs. Patterson, I wanted to write to you on the anniversary of the day you saved our family. Mom and I were talking about how different our life is now, and we realized it all started when you looked at my family drawing and saw what was missing. You saw that I was missing myself. I'm in 6th grade now, and I love school even though I'm not the best student in my class. I make mistakes and learn from them instead of being scared of them. I have real friends who like me for who I am, not for how perfect I can pretend to be. Sometimes I still get sad about Daddy, but now it's the kind of sad that means love, instead of the kind that means something is wrong with me. Mama is happy now too, really happy. Not the careful kind she used to practice for pictures. She laughs at my jokes even when they're terrible, and sometimes she cries when she misses Daddy, and that's okay too. We still miss him every single day, but it's the kind of missing that makes love bigger instead of smaller. I wanted you to know that the little girl who couldn't draw herself in her own family picture is gone. In her place is someone real, someone who knows she's loved, not because she's perfect, but because she's herself. Thank you for teaching me that I was enough just as I was, even when I was too scared to believe it. Love always. Sophia. P.S. Marcus is doing so much better too. His parents started family counseling last month after I told them what helped us. He's learning how to be a kid instead of a tiny adult. Thank you for helping him find me so I could help him find himself. The mentor. By the time Sophia reached middle school, she had developed a reputation as someone younger children felt comfortable talking to about their problems. The school counselor often asked her to mentor new students who seemed to be struggling with anxiety, perfectionism, or family pressures that were too heavy for their young shoulders. Sophia has a gift for recognizing emotional masks, the counselor explained to Mrs. Patterson during one of their occasional catch-ups. She can see through facades because she lived behind one for so long. Other children trust her because she doesn't judge them for struggling. One afternoon, Mrs. Patterson visited the middle school and found Sophia sitting with a young boy who was crying in the hallway, his perfect uniform somehow making his distress more poignant. It's okay to be scared, Sophia was saying softly, her voice carrying the gentle wisdom of someone who had walked through similar darkness. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak or bad. It means you're human, and humans need help sometimes. There's no shame in needing help. The boy looked up at her with the same desperate hope Mrs. Patterson remembered seeing in Sophia's eyes years earlier. My parents will be so disappointed if I don't get all A's this semester. They say anything less than perfect means I'm not trying hard enough. Do you think they love you because of your grades, or do they love you because you're you? Sophia asked gently, settling more comfortably beside him. I don't know anymore. Sometimes it feels like love and grades are the same thing. Want to know a secret that took me a long time to learn? Sophia leaned closer, her voice carrying the confidence of hard-won wisdom. The people who really love you even when you fail. Especially when you fail, because that's when you need love the most. And if someone only loves you when you're perfect, that's not really love. That's just fear wearing a love costume. Mrs. Patterson quietly retreated, knowing Sophia had this handled. The broken child had become a healer, and the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The celebration for Sophia's 14th birthday, Isabella planned something that would have been unthinkable during their perfect phase. a backyard party where the only rule was to have fun and be authentically yourself. Children arrived in play clothes, knowing they'd probably leave dirty and disheveled. There were water balloons that left everyone soaked, messy art stations where creativity mattered more than technique, and a chocolate cake that Sophia had made herself, slightly lopsided but delicious, decorated with handprints from all her friends. Mrs. Patterson, now retired but still close to the family, watched as Sophia opened presents surrounded by genuine friends who loved her for her kindness, her humor, and her ability to make everyone feel accepted exactly as they were. Among the gifts was a journal from Isabella with an inscription that would have been impossible during their earlier struggles. For all your imperfect, beautiful thoughts, dreams, and feelings, may you always have the courage to be completely yourself. Make a wish, Emma called as Sophia prepared to blow out her candles, the tradition carrying extra meaning for a girl who had learned the difference between wishing and hoping. Sophia closed her eyes, then opened them with a smile that lit up her entire face. "I don't need to wish for anything," she said, looking around at the faces of people who loved her unconditionally. "I already have everything I want, a real family, real friends, and the freedom to be really me. Plus chocolate cake, which makes everything even better." As she blew out the candles, Mrs. Patterson caught Isabella's eye across the yard. Both women had tears on their cheeks, but they were tears of joy, gratitude, and amazement at how far they had all come. "Thank you," Isabella mouthed silently, the words encompassing years of transformation and healing. Mrs. Patterson nodded, her heart full with the knowledge that sometimes teachers get to witness miracles, and sometimes they even get to help create them. The legacy years later, Sophia would go on to study child psychology, inspired by her own journey and her desire to help other families trapped by impossible expectations and unprocessed grief. Isabella continued her work with renewed purpose and authenticity, having learned that the best counselors are often those who have walked through their own darkness and emerged stronger but not unscathed. Mrs. Patterson, now in her 70s, still kept that first family portrait in her desk drawer, the one with the empty outline where Miguel should have been. Next to it, she kept Sophia's most recent school photo, a teenager with bright eyes, a genuine smile, and paint smudges on her cheek from an art project that had gone wonderfully, messily wrong. The two images told the complete story of transformation, from a child performing perfection to protect herself and her mother, to a young woman comfortable in her own beautifully imperfect skin and confident in her ability to help others find the same freedom. Children aren't meant to be perfect. Mrs. Patterson would tell new teachers during her occasional guest lectures about recognizing emotional distress in students. They're meant to be real, to make mistakes, to feel their emotions deeply, and to know they're loved regardless of their achievements. Sometimes we have to save them from the adults who love them too much to let them be human. She would always end these talks with the same message that had guided her career. Look for the empty spaces in their drawings and their lives. Look for what's missing. Sometimes what's absent tells you more about a child's world than what's present. And remember that every child is trying to tell you something. Our job is to listen with more than just our ears. The shocking truth: 10 years after that first family portrait, Mrs. Patterson was cleaning out her final classroom files when she made a discovery that stopped her cold. Tucked behind Sophia's artwork was a letter she had never seen before, a letter that had apparently fallen out of Sophia's backpack during those early difficult days and somehow gotten lost in the shuffle of papers. The letter was addressed to Daddy in Heaven in Sophia's careful 8-year-old handwriting, dated just a few days after she had drawn that first family portrait. "Dear Daddy, Mama tells everyone you are on a business trip, but I know you are in heaven because I heard her talking to Grandma about the car accident. She was crying and said she wishes she could have said goodbye. I have been trying to be perfect, so Mama won't be even sadder. But she cries every night anyway when she thinks I'm sleeping. I think Mama needs me to believe you are coming back because she is not ready to say goodbye yet. So I will keep pretending and being the perfect daughter until she is ready to tell me the truth. I don't want her to worry about me too, when she's already so sad about you. I miss you so much, it makes my whole body hurt. But I will take care of Mama like you asked me to that night you tucked me in before you went to heaven. I remember you said I was your brave sunshine girl, and that I should always take care of the people I love. I love you forever and always. Your sunshine girl, P.S. I drew you in my family picture at school today, but I left it empty because I don't want my teacher to ask questions that might make Mama cry again. I'll keep our secret until Mama is ready. Mrs. Patterson stared at the letter, her hands shaking as the full truth crashed over her like a wave. Everything she thought she knew about the case had been wrong. Sophia had known from the very beginning that her father was dead. She had been protecting her mother by pretending to believe he was coming back. This 8-year-old child had shouldered not only her own devastating grief, but her mother's denial as well. She had been the adult in their relationship, carefully maintaining a fiction to protect Isabella from a truth she wasn't ready to face. The empty outline in the family portrait wasn't a child's confusion about her father's absence. It was a deliberate choice, a way to include Miguel without forcing the conversation Isabella couldn't handle. The shocking truth wasn't that a child had been keeping a secret about her father's death. The shocking truth was that sometimes children are forced to become the guardians of their parents' emotional well-being, sacrificing their own childhood to hold a family together when the adults fall apart. Mrs. Patterson sat in her empty classroom, surrounded by boxes of memories from decades of teaching, and wept for the little girl who had been wise enough and strong enough to save her family, while waiting patiently for the adults around her to catch up to what she already knew. In the end, Mrs. Patterson hadn't just saved Sophia from perfectionism and suppressed grief. She had saved a child who was drowning in responsibility that should never have been hers to carry. The impossible burden of managing her mother's emotional survival while grieving her own, devastating loss in silence, and perhaps most remarkably, that child had saved them all, the real family portrait. The discovery of the letter changed everything Mrs. Patterson thought she understood about their journey. She immediately called Isabella, now a dear friend, and read her the letter over the phone, her voice breaking as she shared Sophia's words from so many years ago. The silence that followed was profound and heavy with the weight of new understanding. She knew, Isabella whispered finally, her voice filled with awe and heartbreak. All this time, I thought I was protecting her from the truth, but she was protecting me from my own inability to face it. Children often know far more than we think they do, Mrs. Patterson said gently, her own voice thick with emotion. Sophia was trying to save her family the only way an 8-year-old could, by becoming whatever you needed her to be. That evening, Isabella and Sophia, now 18 and about to start college, sat together in their living room with the letter between them. The afternoon light streamed through windows that no longer needed to frame perfect scenes, casting everything in the golden glow of authentic love. Sophia read the letter quietly, tears streaming down her face as she remembered the enormous weight she had carried so young. I was so scared you would completely break if I told you I knew, she admitted, her voice steady despite her tears. You seemed so fragile, like you might disappear too if I said the wrong thing. I thought it was my job to keep you together. Oh, mija, Isabella pulled her daughter close, holding her with the fierce protectiveness she should have been able to offer years earlier. You were 8 years old. It was never, ever your job to take care of me like that. But I wanted to, Sophia said simply, her honesty as remarkable now as it had been then. I loved you both so much. I thought if I could just be perfect enough, strong enough, maybe the terrible sadness would go away for both of us. They held each other and cried, not the careful, controlled tears of their early grief, but the healing tears of a family finally free to be completely honest about their pain. their love, and their imperfect journey toward wholeness. Later that night, Sophia created one final family portrait. This one showed all of them as they really were. Isabella and Sophia in the present, living and loving, and sometimes struggling together. Miguel was there too, not as an empty space or a wishful outline, but as a presence woven throughout their daily life, in the photos on their walls that no longer made them cry, in the garden he had planted that continued to bloom, in the love he had given them that continued to grow and change even after he was gone. At the bottom, Sophia wrote in her natural flowing handwriting, "Family portrait, the real version. Love never dies, it just learns new ways to show up. Some families are held together by secrets, but ours is held together by truth." The shocking misunderstanding that had driven their story wasn't about death or denial or even childhood grief. It was about the extraordinary lengths to which family members will go to protect each other, even when that protection becomes a prison that traps everyone inside their own fear. And sometimes, Mrs. Patterson realized, as she looked at the final portrait, the most profound act of love is teaching someone that they don't have to be perfect to be worthy of being saved. Sometimes love means giving people permission to fall apart, knowing that real healing can only begin when we stop pretending everything is fine. The empty space in that first drawing had never been about a missing father. It had been about a missing child, a little girl who had disappeared behind a mask of perfection, waiting for someone to see through her performance and call her home to herself. The end.